Let's be consistent.
Welcome back to the Key to Consistency. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and on today's episode, we are going to be exploring the relationship between personal growth and development and consistency. And what do those topics have in common? And how can we become more consistent in our personal growth and development journeys? And so, the first thing that I want to break down with you guys is going to be the power of daily consistent habits, right? If we take someone that we should all know, right? Even if you're not from America, I'm sure you've heard the name of Warren Buffett, right? And so Warren Buffett is known for being an incredible investor. He's super successful, and according to himself, he contributes his achievements to his ability to consistently read. He spends several hours a day reading books and newspapers and financial reports, and that helps him acquire a vast amount of knowledge in order to make successful financial decisions. Now, I wanted to use someone who was extremely successful as an example, but I recognize certainly that, not everyone here is going to have several hours a day to spend just to read, right? Myself included. If you're in like the working class, you spend most of your working hours at work. But I give Warren Buffett as an example because that's something that tangibly we can all understand, that although we can't spend several hours building that daily habit of reading, we can all spend the time that we can consistently doing something small. In the Warren Buffett example, he opts to consistently read, right? The reading itself is helpful and it's great, but it's the result, which is it allows him to create and make better financial decisions when he's investing. So when you think about something that you want to accomplish, what is that thing that you can do that may be super small and super minute that you can do maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes out of the day? Again, I'm not expecting that we have several hours to spend on building these habits, but we're not necessarily looking for the time. At this point, we're looking for our ability to be consistent in building these particular habits that we're trying to build. Because as we work on being consistent in what we may deem as small actions, those things get compounded over time, similar to compounded interest in a bank account. Those small actions over time really will lead to significant progress and amazing transformation, right? If only the only thing that you realize out of your transformation is that I have the ability to consistently do something over and over and over again, and it is going to benefit me, right? If we go back to Warren Buffett as an example, the first time that he sat and read something, he might not have immediately realized the results, right? But over time, as you consistently do something, you begin to, one, get a lot better at it. So if we look at reading as an example, when you first start reading, and I'm not talking about audiobooks, I'm talking about physical books, you begin to pick up different ways to do it more efficiently. Things like speed reading, right? Where you can digest a large amount of information and really come away with the main theme of something versus reading it word for word, right? So I would encourage you, as you're going through and as you're thinking about, what can I adopt and do, even if it's for 5-10 minutes a day, whether it's meditation or something else that you want to do, what can you do for a few moments out of your day in order to make, the small step to becoming more consistent. Today's episode is brought to you by the merch shop at thekeytoconsistency.com. I would encourage you to visit our merch shop to see if there's anything that piques your interest. One of the easiest ways to be consistent is to be visually reminded that you are on a mission. You are going to be consistent. So whether you pick up a phone case or you pick up a t-shirt, we have something for you. Again, that is www.thekeytoconsistency.com. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Awesome, guys. So the next thing that I want to do with you guys is really talk about a growth mindset, right? Because it's great for us to recognize the power of daily habits, but we also need to embrace a growth mindset and the role that a growth mindset actually plays in our growth and development. And so when I personally hear the phrase growth mindset, I always think about Carol Dweck, right? And if you've never heard of who she is or what she did, she wrote a book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, right? And so Carol Dweck is a renowned psychologist and she's a researcher. And really the reason why she wrote the book Mindset was to make sure that her readers had a deeper understanding of how our mindsets influence our success and personal growth. And so one of the things that her research specifically focuses on is, the belief that we have in individual abilities and intelligence, right? And that this is something that can be developed over time as long as a person has the ability to be dedicated and they are willing to put in the effort and they are most importantly willing to learn. That in essence is the growth mindset, right? And so when I read her book, she really does a great job of contrasting the growth mindset to what we may call a fixed mindset. And that is really where people believe that a person's abilities and their intelligence are fixed traits and they cannot be changed or altered over time. So really the premise of her book is to make sure that, as humans, she's challenging the belief that talent, intelligence, ability, all of those things are fixed, right? And her goal in this book is to promote the idea that as humans, we have the capacity to develop and to improve in various areas of our lives. And it's really a great book. It's really inspirational. I read it at a time where I was definitely a person with a fixed mindset. If you listen to the podcast where I talked about money, I revealed some of the challenges that I had with budgeting and my own personal finance. And during that time was when I originally was exposed to Carol Dweck and to her book. And if you have not picked it up, I would encourage you to get it, get the audiobook, get the physical book. It is just a great book. That really gives those practical strategies and examples to really help us think about, where we are from a mindset perspective and really helps us to embrace a growth mindset. And so if I were to, give you guys a realistic example, again, I do want to give you guys, theory, but I also want to give you guys in practice, right? And so if you, again, kind of listen to that podcast about finances, then you know that I was I have my bachelor's degree in finance, and my first job out of college, I was making $10 an hour. Right. And so with that, I inadvertently, from a career path perspective, begun to adopt a mentality that I was stuck with, making a certain amount of money. So even when I got, I went from $10 to getting my first official, job, and I made like 50K. And just for time reference, this was back in like 2019, 2020 type of area. And so it was a time where I'm like, okay, great. 50K, of course, that is a step up from $10 an hour. But over time, again, I personally fell into that comparison trap. Again, dating someone making six figures, you begin to look at, your life, and it's like, well, why am I not making the same amount of money as this person? Or when you see, your friends and they're purchasing certain things, it's like, well, why can't I purchase this? Like I remember, my very first apartment, I couldn't even afford a couch. Like all I really had in my apartment was my bed, and that was really it, right? And so I say that to say, getting back on track to my career trajectory, in my current role, as I told you guys in one of the initial episodes, that I'm striving to become a senior manager, it really helped me when I began to understand that my ability to learn, my ability to, develop myself and really harness personal development was really a part of me reading the book about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, because it wasn't until I read that book where I began to understand you really have a fixed mindset as it relates to your ability to, climb up the corporate ladder, if you will. Right now, my mindset is shifted from corporate into more of a tree. We are trying to really dig down to the root so that way there is nothing left, and we can replace that with a growth mindset, which is something a lot more positive, and you'll be able to look at yourself in a better light. And so hopefully, you guys will be able to take this time to really think about opportunities and areas in your life where do you have a growth mindset? Do you have a fixed mindset? And then once you begin to understand what mindset you have, if you have a growth mindset, great, right? Continue to seek opportunities to learn and to grow. And if you have a fixed mindset, I would encourage you to, one, assess your mindset, assess kind of, again, the source, the root of that. Where did that come from? And then once you begin to identify the source of where those thoughts came from there, you can, again, similar to what I mentioned earlier, you can seek new learning opportunities, whether you decide that you want to take a course online or whether you want to engage in being a mentor, attending workshops or seminars, like whatever you want to do in order to help yourself personally continue to grow and to develop. That's really what we want to do when we think about how we are going to embrace that growth mindset to help us become a lot more consistent, because you can only grow to the extent that you're developing, right? The moment that you decide, what, I'm going to stop developing, at that point, all growth stops as well. And so that's why we want to always be on an upward trajectory of growing and growing at a consistent pace, right? Again, it doesn't need to be super fast. You don't need to be at the head of the class, but you want to make sure that you are at a pace and that you are moving in a way that really allows you to get to your goal in a steady manner. And as you approach your goal, whatever your goal may be, if it is to, continue to read more books, you'll find that you'll continue to want to push that goal back, and you want to achieve higher and you want to achieve more, because as humans, we are ultimately all goal-oriented creatures. And so hopefully, as we again begin to assess our mindsets, from there we can seek new learning opportunities. And then the last thing that I want to encourage you to do As the final kind of action item and takeaway from today's episode is really to think about developing your own personal development plan, right? The way that you can really start this process is to start by assessing your current strengths and your current weaknesses, right? And then really outlining action items to help you enhance your own personal growth. So to make this practical, let's say step one is we're going to sit back and we're going to reflect on our aspirations. We're going to take time to think about those long-term goals and those areas of our lives that we really want to improve upon, right? We want to think about our lives from every single aspect: spiritual, relationship, health, career, personal skills, hobbies. And those are just some broader buckets, but every single area in your life that you find is a space where you want to improve, certainly jot that down and let's reflect on those aspirations. Once you actually have your aspirations written down, from there, let's write down a specific goal that you want to achieve in an area, right? Whether it is, career perspective, hey, I want a promotion in the next year, or from a relationship perspective, I want to go 2 months without arguing with my spouse, or from a health perspective, I want to lose, 3 or 4 pounds. Whatever it is in each of those areas, just make sure that you have a goal written down to correspond to those aspirations. And then the next thing we can do after we have our aspirations kind of written down is we can assess our current situation, right? Let's look at those strengths and those weaknesses in relation to the goals that we have. Is there a skill gap, right? Is there a knowledge gap, right? So to give a tangible example, if we're thinking about your goal from a relational perspective is I don't want to fight with my significant other for 2 months, right? Well, is there a skill gap? Is there a knowledge gap? Do you need to self-reflect on your own triggers and then apply what you've learned about yourself to your relationship, right? If it's about, losing weight, and you say, hey, I have a weakness for, not knowing how to meal prep, right? Like, what is it? Is it a skill gap? Is it a knowledge gap? What is stopping you from hitting this? And once you already know what is stopping you from hitting that, you are able to, one, identify any self-defeating behaviors or any limiting beliefs that you have when you begin to not just look at the goal and what you want, but you look at that gap in the middle that says, what's stopping me from getting here? Is it me? Is it something I don't have? Like, just be honest and begin to engage in that dialogue with yourself. And then from there, you begin to see those tangible results. Right. So step one was to reflect on our aspirations. Step two, assess your current situation. Step three is to create SMART goals. If you've listened to our podcast about time, you know that SMART is nothing new. You want to make sure that your goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. You want to break down those larger goals into smaller, manageable milestones and make sure that you constantly celebrate those smaller achievements along the way, right? Even if you have not completed the entire thing, you've at least done something. And it is important to keep yourself motivated by giving yourself a pat on the back as well, right? Of course, we want to make sure that we go into our next step and we seek resources for support. Again, whether those are, mobile applications, whether it is support groups, online courses, mentors, workshops, whatever you need in order to make sure that you have those resources and support at your disposal is certainly what we want in order to make sure that we don't miss a beat, in order to make sure that we have a higher chance of success, because we have people that are just as ingrained and just as embedded in our success as we are. And of course, we want to make sure throughout this entire process that we stay motivated and that we stay accountable. We want to make sure that we As mentioned earlier, find time to celebrate those small wins. Help to remind yourself about your long-term vision, whether you want to have sticky notes up around your home that you kind of look at as you're passing the mirror. You see a sticky note about your long-term vision. You place a sticky note next to your keys. You have one, when you get in your car, like whatever you want to see or whatever you need to see, visual cues are some of the most powerful cues that you can have in your life in order to make sure that you stay on track. And lastly, just remember, guys, that personal development, just like building consistency, is an ongoing journey. So as you're building out your plan, make sure that you review it and that you update it, whether you take a look at it every Sunday, monthly, bi-weekly, whatever cadence works best for you, just to make sure that as you as a human are evolving, you're adjusting your goals and you're adjusting those aspirations as needed. With everything, we want to make sure that we are being kind to ourselves, we are being patient, we are being polite, we are embracing both the successes and those setbacks as well, because they both allow us to learn something from a success as well as from a setback. And so, lastly, guys, I do want to leave you with a verse from my favorite book, and hopefully it is yours as well. Psalm 139, verses 23 through 24. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So as we think about personal development and we think about our personal growth, it is important that we ask God to really test us and to know our hearts, to reveal, as mentioned earlier, the gap, right, between our aspiration and our goals. What are some of those thoughts that we're having around our goals, around what we're trying to accomplish? Are we speaking death over our aspirations because we don't know how we're going to cross over that chasm between what we want to achieve and what we currently have, right? So it is important that we ask our Father to make sure that He searches our heart, right? Making sure that we are being honest with ourselves. And if we aren't being honest with ourselves, that the Holy Spirit will be honest with us and reveal to us what we need to do in order to make sure that we get those anxious thoughts out of our heads. Well, I will speak to you guys next time. Remember, consistency breeds mastery and transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Key to Consistency. Wherever you are listening to this podcast, it would mean everything to me if you could rate it, review it, reach out to me on Instagram. Would love your feedback, would love to hear anything you like, anything you don't like. Please feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit from it. And until next time, bye guys.